So I would first just like to welcome you all. My name is Tasha Brown, and I am Within Meditation's community manager. And today we're going to have a conversation with three of our Within teachers, and we're focusing this conversation around the theme of meditation anchors. And the first of our teachers that I'd like to introduce today that's here to discuss this topic is Herky Chopra. Herky, just to give you a little background about her, she has had a deep meditative practice for a long time. She grew up in India with exposure to wisdom teachings there and the guidance of an enlightened master. She has had a corporate career in project management, as well as being a life coach for women. And for the past 12 years, she has deep dived in various modalities and practical applications in personal development, positive psychology, career and life coaching, mindfulness, and spirituality, integrating East and West wisdom teachings. And in her own personal journey, raising 3 children as a single mom and a full-time career, Herky has found meditation to be her constant companion, to not only get grounded and overcome the stresses of modern living, but also to find meaning, joy, and beauty in her daily life. And then another one of our teachers I'd like to introduce is Manisha Dudley. And Manisha is a scientist by training, as she holds a graduate degree in molecular biology from the University of Colorado Boulder. And she became interested in meditation as therapy for chronic insomnia. Her dedicated personal practice has proven to be an invaluable tool for tempering the stress and anxieties of modern living. She's a graduate of the Training in Mindfulness Facilitation program at the UCLA Mindful Awareness Research Center. And she's also certified as a professional mindfulness teacher by the International Mindfulness Teachers Association. Finally, she is also the founder of Meditation for Modern Life, and that's an online resource for integrating mindfulness meditation into our contemporary lives. And then finally, I'd like to introduce Desiree Matloob. Desiree is a national board certified health and wellness coach. She's a behavioral health consultant and a mindfulness teacher. And she's passionate about using mindfulness and coaching to help people clarify what matters most to them, to work through their limiting beliefs, and to take action in their lives. She's been practicing meditation since 2009, and since 2016, she's made a yearly 10-day silent meditation Vipassana retreat, and that's part of her personal practice. And she has led mindfulness workshops, classes, and strategy within various workplaces and community-based organizations. And I think that gives you all a little bit of a sense of our 3 teachers. And I'm just so happy they're here. So I just would like to thank them for being here and to share their insights and wisdom with us today. And to begin, I just wanted to maybe start with asking Herky to maybe give some opening thoughts or remarks about meditation anchors, and then have Desiree and Manisha join the conversation after.
Thank you, Tasha. So as far as anchors in meditation go, we use an anchor to direct our attention to a reference point, basically to stabilize our thoughts, and we're not giving any value to that reference point, that object, or whatever is the anchor. And there can be various types of anchor. Breath is the most commonly used, but it can also be sounds, mantra, counting, sensations, visuals. Some people even use pain as when they're experiencing that. And then you just, as the mind wanders, which it often does, which it always does, you just redirect your attention back to the reference point, not calling it again good, bad, or anything. And this helps to stabilize your thoughts and, focus. And so, for example, when you do the breath, you could focus on the nostrils, the warm air and the cool air, and the where you feel the sensation, is it inside the nose and the upper lip, or on the in the chest, the expansion and the contraction, or on the belly with the rise and fall of the belly, and so on and so forth.
Maybe we'll move on to Manisha. Any opening thoughts or insights to share before we get into the questions?
I first of all, I think Herky's description of anchors is spot on. So thanks for that. What's most salient for me these days as a teacher with anchors is making sure that folks know that they can experiment with anchors until they find something that's accessible for them. So while our intention is generally to land our focus on something that's neutral, something that doesn't have an emotion attached to it or any significant meaning. That's not always the case, even though that's our intention. So I know I used to always offer the breath as an anchor. And there are folks out there for whom that doesn't work for a lot of different reasons. So keeping it accessible is one of the things that I think is really important for you. You should never feel like, oh, I can't connect to the breath. I have asthma, for example, or I get anxiety when I connect to the breath. I had a student once with COPD from decades of smoking. He was like, I cannot do meditation because I can't focus on my breath. So there's always an alternative. And as Herky mentioned, the most common anchors are generally focusing on the body, the breath, or sound. But there are other options, even for seated meditation. So always knowing that there's things to explore and to ask your within teachers about that if you're ever kind of facing an obstacle there with what they're offering. So yeah, that's sort of what comes to mind at the moment for me, expanding on what Herky said.
Wonderful. What about you, Desiree? Anything to add to the conversation at the beginning here?
Yeah, I mean, I think Manisha and Herky both put it really well, that common anchors are the breath, the body, the sound. For me, an anchor is anything that allows me to stay in the present moment. So I often ask myself, and I ask my students to ask themselves, is my mind where my body is? We want to do that check-in. And if it's not, what will help my mind come back to where my body is? And so for a lot of people, that is body sensations, the breath, and the sounds. But for some people, they might need a mantra. For some people, they might need to combat the negative thoughts with healthy self-talk. So just saying something like, I'm calm and I can weather the storm. I'm resilient and I'm strong. So anything that helps them come back to the present moment. While often it is the actual sensations, it can be something else. It can be connecting to your higher, wiser self. So anything that helps you prioritize the experience of the present moment rather than prioritizing the thought loop. And that to me is an anchor, which again, it can be anything, which is the beauty of it.
That kind of takes us into one of the questions we have around the different types of anchors there are. And Desiree, you're saying it can be anything. And you mentioned a bunch of the ones it can be, and I think Herky and Manisha did as well. But are maybe just to give a few more, if you guys can think of any more, and even beyond meditation, anchors when you're just trying to be mindful as you're going about your day too. If you guys could add to that.
I know my son had anxiety a few years back, and I know that he wasn't all in for meditation per se, but he needed something solid to hold on to. So I gave him, which is still here on my table, like a stone. It doesn't have to be a certain way. It just said at that time, courage or peace or whatever. And it helped him to just, as he faced his anxiety, to just in the classroom hold on to it and have something solid. I know that people also send me, like for kindergartners, pictures of their parents or whatever gives them comfort, or a blanket, or and I thought that even in some of my meetings that can get rather stressful, I used to at one point also use something like that, or just acupressure points on my body, just I couldn't do the breath at that time because there was so much talking and I didn't know when I would be called. So I found at that time breath. I also do have asthma. I am able to do for the breath, the rise and fall of the belly works best for me versus watching the nostrils. Um, but I would just put the pressure points on this during a meeting, and it just helped me. Like I would be under the table, so it would just help me calm my nerves. So there's a plethora of ways, and I think with meditation, I always say it's not like a self-improvement project. It's more about self-discovery. So to each person, and things what works for you today may not work tomorrow, and what works in the morning may be different in the evening, what works in certain environment may be different. So it's just knowing what is it that works for you. So during the meditation, sometimes I will shift the anchors to the sound and the breath and something else, and just advise people to explore, invite them to explore what is it that they are connecting with, helps them come to the present moment.
I really like what you said, Herky, about the physical anchors. I actually haven't played around with that, whether it's like physically touching your fingers or the physical stone you gave your son. I really like that, and I kind of want to try that now. I've always stuck with more mental things. I think for a lot of people, thinking of a place that gives them a lot of peace, whether it's a forest or a beach, is really helpful. And I kind of brought this up, but for me, connecting to my higher self, which is myself on retreat, myself that is able to let go and just experience things as they arise without clinging or rejecting. And so for me, when I'm going about my day and let's say getting stressed about something or reacting to something, I come back to this sort of statement I have for myself about my highest self. And I connect with that, and that brings me back to the present moment. So it's kind of nice. Like I'm learning more too about what possible anchors could be just in this conversation, but it can be anything you connect to.
I agree with that. And I think that when you're thinking about an anchor with mindfulness specifically, a lot of times it's simply about coming back into the moment and connecting to some characteristic of the moment, whatever's there now. I know some of the barriers to meditation can be getting sleepy. Seated meditation, you can start to fall asleep. Really normal. And also restlessness. I've definitely sat in meditation with a lot to do that day, but, really kind of like, I'm going to meditate no matter what. This is what I'm going to, this is my practice. And just being agitated and anxious and restless, unable to sit still because there's so many things going on, right? And so one of the anchors that's a little bit unusual, but it's not really used in seated meditation, but in walking meditation, is just the movement of the body. So movement can also be a anchor. If you practice yoga, that the postures can be your anchor. Of course, that is coming back to the body, so it's still that somatic connection. But in particular, when we're doing mindful walking, so there's a couple types of way to bring walking into practice. One is walking meditation. So that's, when you see folks kind of pacing back and forth, sort of like 10 to 15 steps, slowly walking up it slowly. There, the anchor, generally, the instructions are to come back to the body, right? The feeling of lifting and falling of your foot, the shifting of your body as you walk. But if you're doing a mindful walk, so that's a little different than walking meditation. That's where you might actually go outside, and decide to walk around your neighborhood or in a park, somewhere pleasant, hopefully. And you can connect to anything, right? So usually you would do this solo, right? You wouldn't be walking with a friend and conversing, but okay, I'm going to bring walking into my mindfulness practice today because I'm too agitated to sit in meditation. And then you can bring in what you smell. You can bring in what you hear. You can bring in what you see. So you can bring in all of those characteristics, all those things that you sense in the present moment as your anchors. And whenever the mind wanders or you find yourself caught up in an emotion or just kind of on that sort of automatic flow of thinking, you can come back to, okay, what's here now, right? Here's a tree, here's a bird, here's a car passing. What do I hear right now? What do I hear now in this moment? And so you can really, really play with all the different senses of the present moment when you bring a little movement and you go outside for meditation.
Wonderful. This next question is kind of focusing in on two specific anchors and how you all would recommend somebody use them in meditation. So the question is, how can sight or smell be used as an anchor in mindfulness practices?
So I can chime in here because I think I was sort of already on that kind of vein, is that particularly when sight and smell are available, right? So if I decide to meditate this morning sitting in this chair, there's not a lot to look at, to be honest, and there's not a lot to smell, right? But if I'm meditating somewhere where those things are an option, I can bring them into my practice. These are characteristics, again, of the present moment, and connecting to them brings me more to the experience, more awake to the present moment. Great way to pull into walking meditation again, right? So many, as the seasons change, we smell different, I smell the fall in Seattle. I smell the spring in Seattle. I can bring that into my meditation coming back. Also what we see. And also paying attention as we do that, because these are adding texture to our meditation. As we do that, what is coming up for us, right? So when I walk in my neighborhood on those really kind of days I just can't sit in meditation, I need to get up and move, it is a bit more challenging. So I'll walk by my kids' old elementary school and become nostalgic because they are now all big. And that's coming into my experience. Sometimes I'll have a really pleasant memory and I feel like, why would I want to push that away? So this gentle recognition of just how the mind wanders. And coming back into that experience, not pushing it out, but then coming back to what's here right now. And what do I see? Where am I going? And what do I sense moment by moment? So those are some ways that smell and sight can come into meditation.
I really like that. I think what came to mind for me was incorporating sight and smell into mindful practices that you might not think of those two senses as a primary. And to get a little more specific, in mindful eating, we often focus just on the taste of food, but there's also the smell. There's also the sight. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What's the anticipation like? And then what's the taste? So adding in kind of what Manisha was saying, adding in these different layers to the experience, like as you're walking, adding in these different components, as you're eating, adding in these different components of sight and smell. So it's this idea of incorporating the little details that you might not otherwise notice. And I think that's the beauty of meditation, is we're so used to looking at everything outside, and suddenly we close our eyes and this whole world that we did not have access to before is suddenly alive. And by being able to look at these different senses that we might not otherwise really take another look at, we're able to, again, bring ourselves into the moment and add more self-discovery, more sensation, more awareness of what's there. So bringing it into mindful eating is one example, but just thinking about how to incorporate those senses throughout your day in any activity that you're doing where they might not be the primary focus, but adding them in enriches the experience.
Yeah, and I think personally for me, incense just puts me directly, I find it easier to drop into meditation. Just growing up with incense a lot in terms of smell. And sight, sometimes just the sight of the moon from the window or the clouds just helps to settle in. So there is so much available to us beyond the mat too.
I like what Herky's bringing in right now, because what it brings up to me is, certainly I've had students say, I can't concentrate, and stick with a breath or whatever's being offered as an anchor. And as Herky speaking, I am coming up with this idea to tell people. I haven't told people this before, but if you position yourself somewhere to meditate where there is some texture to what you can see, if your eyes are open, it could be helpful in the sense that I can imagine myself sitting in meditation and losing my attention faltering or getting sleepy and opening my eyes and focusing on what I see. And now for me personally, if I'm just looking at an object, like a lamp or whatever may be in front of me, I can get a little bit dizzy, a little bit nauseous. That's just something about me, maybe true for others. So looking a little bit further up and beyond, like through a window and connecting to clouds or connecting to trees or connecting to cars passing by, play with it, see what works for you. Certainly, there's always this idea that I've never done. I don't know if anybody else has, but the candle flickering, watching the candle, like to me, that's a little bit unsettling because it's hard for me to focus like that. Maybe it's because my eyesight isn't very good on an object like that right in front of me, but expanding it a bit, because in the end, it's really about doing what works for you and bringing that sort of accessibility piece in. Right? There's no right or wrong anchor or way to connect.
And I'd just like to add, based on what you said, bringing the component of judgment, because speaking of smell, what is pleasant to one could trigger something else for another. In the same instance, my daughter says I get allergies from it. And I've heard of people who say, oh, the smell of roses reminds me of my boyfriend I broke up with, so it triggers a lot of memories. And I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts? Because I usually say, like, when we remove the judgment from the moment and come back to presence, so whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, whether it's tasting it or smelling or seeing, going beyond the judgment piece helps. But what do you usually tell people when they say, a sight or a smell or some anchor is like setting them off?
I mean, I would say for me, it's those simple instructions to be curious about what's coming up. And, within doing a mindfulness practice, sometimes things do get triggered within us based on whatever experience we're having that day. And part of the practice is practice, meeting that moment with easefulness, as Herky's alluding to, non-judgment, which isn't easy. So when it's not easy, recognizing that. It's not easy. My judging mind is really strong. And we're not judging that either, right? In our best way. Or at the very least, recognizing, being aware that this is a tendency that everyone has. I mean, we are designed to judge for a reason, right? We judge our lives around us for survival, really, right? Like that evolutionary need to discern between good and bad. And so noticing where in our lives that piece of our experience where we can kind of transcend above that sort of primal need to judge and make a choice.
Yeah, I really like what you said about the curiosity and the non-judgment. So if there is a trigger, just noticing what's happening with the trigger and also not judging yourself and being compassionate, because that's how the mind is, right? We don't get to control the mind, but we do get to control how we treat ourselves. And one thing I like to say is we like to stretch ourselves, but not to the point where we pull a muscle. So if there's something that is triggering you, you don't have to keep focusing on it and hoping that, you can just be totally zen with it and no aversion, no craving. Maybe that's not what you focus on, and that's okay. So noticing when something's too much and being kind to yourself, and then noticing when you can approach it with curiosity and see it differently as well.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I like bringing in that piece, Desiree, that self-compassion piece, and sort of balancing it out with that tendency many of us have for striving and being good and saying, let me challenge myself. Let me sit in the most possible uncomfortable position for meditation, because that means that I'm doing it better. And that's definitely something that I think anyone can struggle with, like, I want to get better at this. And we bring that into a lot of aspects of our lives. And maybe, bringing in the possibility that this is the one activity, my meditation practice, where I can let go of that for 30 minutes a day or however long I meditate. It's not an all or nothing. Doesn't mean you can't get back out into your life and strive, but just bringing that curiosity of what it feels like to say, yeah, most people meditate sitting cross-legged on the floor on a cushion, but I can't do that. And I don't have to force myself to do that. And knowing that really can translate then to how we approach other things in our life and maybe soften some of the spaces that need to be softened.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add, when you said non-striving, one of the attitudes of mindfulness, I recently experienced, I was in a family get together and it was getting just too much. And although I do use acceptance a lot in terms of acknowledging what is, but I needed to physically remove myself for a few minutes, just get some fresh air. So when something is triggering, I feel, and sometimes my judgmental mind was like, what kind of meditation teacher are you? And but that doesn't mean, of course, just being, we're always practicing, so I think what helped me was to clear the air, get out of that, remove myself from that for a few minutes, get some fresh air, and also feel connected to my body. So I could feel my heart racing. And I could literally, after a few minutes, feel like the dissolving of whatever was going on. And it just helps to center. So yes, knowing the difference between accepting and non-striving, and knowing when to let go and when to, sit with it. So.
I think it's really key what Herky just mentioned right at the end, knowing when to strive, knowing when to accept, knowing when to sit with what's there. And there's not an easy answer to all of that. And what has worked for me in my practice over time is really defaulting to what's the easiest, easeful, kindest thing I can do for myself in a moment that feels stressful. And I'm making those choices, right? Sometimes we don't have the luxury of making the choice, right? Striving has to happen or acceptance has to happen. But when we're kind of riding the fence, what feels kind, what feels best for me in this moment, and going with that rather than, and this is the mindfulness piece, what is a right or wrong thing to do? What would other people prefer me to do? And just noticing if that's helpful, deferring to self-compassion.
What strikes me as we're talking about this is that I so often hear, I'm not a good meditator, I can't meditate, I've tried. And what we're talking about is meditating is being kind to yourself. Meditating is simply noticing. Meditating is when to give yourself space. There's so much kindness and ease and just resting in what is that meditation is. But there is some societal expectation that it's about rigidly sitting cross-legged on a cushion, eyes closed, focusing on the breath, bringing your mind back there. And it just, to me, I'm hearing it's such a kinder, gentler practice, more so than what people see it as. And I wish that was just available for people to know that meditation isn't about perfection and it's not about striving. It's about noticing what's true for you in the moment. So hopefully we're getting that across, that there isn't a right way or a perfect way. This is a time where you maybe let go of that striving, as Manisha was saying, and just be and notice.
Definitely. And I think that the next question we have kind of plays into this. And I'd like to welcome Tiffany to ask her question if she wants to come off mute. And perhaps one of the teachers can jump in, or all of you, to give her some feedback.
Yeah, thank you. So the question I kind of had that kind of plays off of this is what anchors you to your practice when life gets busy and it's easy to put off doing the sitting practice of meditation? And is it similar to the anchors that you utilize during your practice that kind of call you back into it?
So I can try to tackle that. So one of the practices that I like to talk about because I use it a lot is stop practice. I don't know if you guys have heard of that though, but it's just an acronym and it stands for stop, the S. T is take a breath, the O is observe, and the P is proceed. And this is really helpful when you kind of need a mindful moment in your day. It's not that you have access to, logging into a within class and spending a 30 or 40 minutes meditating, but you want to bring mindfulness into your day. And the truth is, a lot of us are living very stressful, frenetic lives, and our emotional state can get the better of us. So stop in itself can be an anchor, that short meditation where we're simply saying, okay, life feels a little bit like it's getting out of hand. And internally, I'm just going to stop for a moment. I'm going to pause. I'm going to take a breath. And if breath is inaccessible, I'm going to feel into my body, or I'm going to open up to sound, or I'm going to see what there is to see. I'm going to observe what's happening. So what does my body feel like? What emotions are present? And then I'm going to proceed. And really, you can do all of that in 15 seconds. And that's really something that I think can anchor me in a day, particularly when I feel frazzled or very anxious. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, I just like to add, for me, sound helps me since maybe I've been used to as a child. So certain sounds, for example, the flute meditation music or something like that, just helps me center immediately. So I can use it while washing dishes or while being at work or anything like that. Also, the rise and fall of the belly, which I find it easy to center. Sometimes when my kids were younger, I would sit at the bus stop on the grass. So just sitting on the earth helps me feel supported. So just especially when my kids were small, I used to feel overwhelmed quite a bit. And I would just feel that I'm being supported by the earth. So I don't need to take it all on me. That would help me. And at work, we started a just a minute break. I went for a retreat a few years back, and they would ring a bell by the hour every hour. And no matter what you were doing, you would stop doing and just, take a minute. And I just drew inspiration from that. And just within my team, we used Microsoft Teams. So one of us will say, take a minute, and we'll stop what we're doing and just take a minute. So.
For me, during particularly busy times, mindfulness is just awareness of the present moment. So I'll find the most easeful way to do that. One that I love is in my bed, just lying in my bed and feeling in the morning or right before I'm going to go to bed and just feeling the warmth, feeling the sensations, feeling the comfort. So that's mindfulness. That's doing a mindful practice of really being in the moment. And if you want to breathe and take some soft belly breaths during that, that also helps. But noticing those sensations, or if I'm showering, feeling like I'm doing the mountain pose and just feeling myself grounded, the grounding energy, the rain falling on, the top of my head, and really feeling into all of the sensations. And you could apply that to everything, right? Walking from one building to the other, feeling all the sensations of the wind, all the sights, all the sounds. So this is what I like to emphasize, that even during busy times, meditation or mindfulness can be done during the busyness. It can be done while you're making your coffee, if you're noticing the smells and noticing the taste very mindfully. And I remember when I was a kid, and I'm a triplet, so my mom had her hands full, she would go into the car to meditate. That was her time. Sometimes you can't meditate in the house. So finding unique ways that work for you. I think there's no right or wrong, as long as you're just present for a couple of minutes.
Thank you so much. Love all of those ideas.
Wonderful. Another question that's on here, and you guys have kind of touched on this a little bit already, but to kind of give it a little more space, is when your mind is really chattery. So we have that monkey mind and it's going all over the place, and you've tried a bunch of anchors to either when you're sitting in meditation practice and you're focusing on the breath, or say you're in your daily life and you try to look at a tree to ground yourself for a moment, but your mind keeps just going all over the place. What kind of tips or tricks do you have to offer people when our minds just seem like they won't quit and we can't anchor them? What should we do? Where should we go? What should we try?
You can go. I think there are multiple things. I'm sure Desiree and Manisha would have to like to add, but labeling helps sometimes when you're caught in a thought loop. So just the thoughts, first of all, just knowing that the intention is not to be vacuumed free of thought and to reach this thoughtless state. Making peace with that, because some people come with that intention that suddenly my mind will be clear of all thoughts. So knowing the monkey mind will chatter and making peace with that. Thoughts, when they come and you're caught in a loop, you could say like thought. You could also say past, future, not now. One of my teachers used to say not now, and somehow every time she would give that instruction, my mind would almost like listen to her and stop. So experimenting with a few of those is what I can think of.
Yeah, I have some ideas. Meditation isn't a cure-all, right? So if you really can't focus, exercise. Do something that gets rid of some energy, gets you out of that mind state, and then come back and try meditating when your body has released some of that adrenaline. So exercise is one. Another that I like, that I learned from actually techniques around weight loss, and maybe weight loss isn't the right term, mindful eating that is healthier, is for that context, often they recommend that when you go and you like eat too much cake or cookies because you're stressed, take a few mindful moments after and see, did that actually help me? Did eating that cookie or having that drink actually remove my problems, actually remove the stress for the long term? You do that enough and you start to train your brain, no. And the same can happen with thoughts. So instead of being scared of thoughts, like, a thought's happening, I have to come right back to the body. If you're having that many thoughts, cool, stay on that thought train. See if it helps and take note of it. So spend however long you want in that thought train, notice your stress rise and take note of that, and do that a few times. And your body and your mind will start to process, no, this is not something I want to do. I know where this goes. Because sometimes we think that by thinking more, we can solve a problem in our head. Often with stress, we're like, let me solve this. Let me overthink it to death. But when we realize that that actually doesn't help, it makes us more likely to say, okay, well, let me try something else. So those are two strategies I have, which are not conventional meditation, obviously, but have helped me and have helped others.
I definitely would say, take the conventional out of practice. If you're having challenges in particular, that doesn't mean that there's not value in the traditional practices at all. Absolutely explore that as much as you want. But when you hit a wall, right? Like my mind is incredibly restless and I don't want to sit here. I go back to default to what's most easeful when it comes to mindfulness practice. You're probably not going to get to do that with everything else in your life, but this is something that if you're choosing to bring into your life, is a place to practice that. And when those mindful practices aren't accessible, one suggestion, and this is not for everyone, but for some, is to default to the practices of self-compassion, loving kindness meditation, and explore, well, does this shift things for me? Where you're still taking some time to slow down, which I think is one of the big benefits of meditation, is you're slowing everything down a little. You're seeing things more clearly because they're not blurry, because you're not moving so fast. And that's really valuable in benefit of mindfulness or any kind of meditation. So slowing it down and noticing what that feels like and being kind to yourself. A lot of a lot of times, you go back to that expectation we have to strive to be good at this, or what's wrong with me because my mind is so restless and I can't do this at all. I think we probably all felt that in some aspect of something we've tried to do, like, I'm just not good at this. Well, nobody is good or bad at meditation. You either do it or you don't. Or even if seated meditation isn't your thing, mindfulness can absolutely be brought into so many activities like we've been talking about: eating, walking, driving, washing the dishes. Doesn't really matter. There is some intentionality there. There is some effort you have to put in. And when that mind is really restless, the instructions are generally to just notice that, right? You've taken 15 minutes of mindfulness to notice exactly how restless your mind is and bring a sense of accepting awareness to that. No need to change it, because you couldn't, even if you wanted to, intentionally stop thinking. And then to offer kindness, non-judgment, and compassion just to yourself, which is pretty radical, right? At least in my opinion. It's not easy to do. It's easy to talk about, but it's not always easy to authentically say, hey, I'm okay the way I am, and can I be kind to myself? Sometimes, I don't know, Herky mentioned she has kids, I do too. I was like, what if I was my child? What would I say, right? It's fine, it's okay. Mine is really restless today. That's how my mind is. I can accept that for the moment.
Just piggybacking on that, my spiritual master in India used to always say the mind is like a child. And since you mentioned you have to use different tricks sometimes. You know how they will scream at the checkout counter. Sometimes you give in to the tantrum. Sometimes you pacify, appease. Sometimes you do the not now. So sometimes you just play around with it and it shifts moment by moment and you just mold yourself into it. And just to be careful that we're so conditioned to be outcome based, to not make it meditation also like you have to achieve or get somewhere. Even sometimes meditation can become an ambitious project. So just being mindful of that.
I love all you're saying about experimenting, self-compassion. All of this is just so wonderful. But one thing another question that we have that, keeps in mind that we're experimenting, we're all going to have different anchors that kind of work for us and such. Is there some anchors, though, that work better in general for most people, depending on what they're trying to get out of the meditation, without striving maybe for as not too much of a result, but some, like, say sometimes people want to really increase their concentration, or say they're having a lot of trouble sleeping, or what's another example? They want to build their focus, which I guess goes back to concentration. But are there some kind of overarching anchors that kind of work better for different things that people are trying to work on in themselves or help themselves with? Is there anything that kind of jumps out with any of you with that kind of question?
That's an interesting question, because I do think it's so individual, as we were saying. So I don't know if there's an overarching, this is what you should do for this. I will say that for sleep, a very common treatment for insomnia is progressive muscle relaxation, which is a kind of meditation. And that involves just tensing. It's essentially doing a body scan and tensing a body part as you inhale and releasing as you exhale, and just going from the top of the head to the tips of the toes, or vice versa. And I've actually tried it, and I think part of why it works so well if you're up in the middle of the night and your thoughts are racing is that it gives you something to do. It's not just focusing on the breath or sensation. You actively have to tense and do something. And so it helps you get away from the thoughts a little bit more and relax your body to go to sleep. So that I know for sleep, it's it's a very common recommendation for insomnia, that specific type of tensing and releasing meditation practice. But I'm actually curious to hear from Herky and Manisha if they know if certain kinds of anchors are best for certain kinds of, I guess, gosh, the word that's coming to mind is ambitions, and it's definitely not the word I'm trying to say, but if certain kinds of anchors are better for certain kinds of contexts.
So I think the first thing I'd say, you get into a little tricky territory when you begin meditating for a specific reason, but most of us do that, right? I started meditating because I was having insomnia. So it's not that you can't do that, but it's a little tricky thinking what's going to work for me. But that's sometimes a process we have to go through. When it comes to anchors, my personal opinion is that there aren't specific anchors that I can think of right now that are better for maintaining mindfulness than others, right? Or if I want to be able to concentrate more, definitely meditation is something that increases our capacity to concentrate. You know, we've read the articles about how our prefrontal cortex and executive functioning gets better when we meditate. There's a lot of science out there about all of that. But at the same time, generally, we're not holding that intention when we come to mindfulness meditation practice. So what works for one may or may not work for another. Kind of shifting the question a little, and not intentionally, but what's coming to mind is when offering anchors as teachers, it is important to offer options. There's actually an article I read recently that talked about, it was a study that talked about, is offering a specific anchor inhibiting for people from coming back to meditation practice. So a lot of times people start mindfulness-based interventions or practices, and then they quit halfway through. And so the study was looking at, are people leaving because they can't connect to the specific anchor? And I think what they found was that most people, so they did a study where they're like, what anchor works best for you? Breath, sound, or body? And I think what they eventually determined from this group of people was most people do like using the breath as their anchor. Like that's the majority of people. It may be like half. And then the other half is sort of split somehow between sound and sensation. And then I think it also talked about some individuals did indeed report that, I like this better now because I know I don't only have to focus on the breath. So I think it's sort of a mixed bag is really what I take away. And that's why you really just want to explore which anchors. If your intention is I want to concentrate, I want to be able to focus more in life, then find the anchor that allows you to do that, rather than thinking this anchor will do this for me and this one will not. That's my kind of experiential answer.
Yeah, I also say explore, discover, find out for yourself. You've been given a lot of rules. Try to find out what holds true for you, what aligns with you. So, not a common prescription.
Wonderful. Well, just being mindful of time, I wanted to just offer for any of you to just give a couple sentences to wrap up. And as you do, kind of wrapping up the conversation, letting the students and also those watching the recording know when you teach within meditation regularly during the week. So any wrapped up thoughts about this conversation and when you teach?
I will pass on something I was given: discover your own truth. I think it's a powerful statement and you try to imbibe it. Also, just on the sleep part, when we were talking about, I feel like being intentional about the practice also had its place. There was a time that myself and the kids, we would have a time, lately we've fallen off, but we would gather together, call it share and prayer, and just have moments of meditation or silence or sometimes devotional aspects. And then followed by just sharing our day, being vulnerable with how my day at work was, how their day with school, emotions, anything, challenges, gratitude, just having that and being intentional. Sometimes you can do it as a family structure, you can do it yourself. I also do wake up at 3 or 3:30. Again, not intentionally, I just happen to wake up. And for me, sleep is not an issue. I do fall asleep easily, but I use that time because it's a good time to meditate when I go. I'll either sit on the bed or just sit on the floor and take 15, 20, 30 minutes, however long it takes. And it just helps me have a much deeper sleep until I wake up at 6. So something I wanted to add.
And Herky, could you share with everyone when you regularly teach at Within so they know how they
Right.
could sit with you sometime?
Yes. So Wednesdays, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. And Sundays, I do alternate Sundays. I'll be doing more Sundays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Yeah. And it's called Relax, Unwind, and De-Stress.
I can go next. I think what I want to leave people with following this conversation is what we've emphasized, that your anchor is up to you. It can be breath, it can be sound, it can be sensation, it can be sight, it could be smell, it could be a mantra. It's whatever helps you, and you can discover that for yourself. There's no right or wrong answer. There's no prescription. It's really a time for you to get to know yourself, get to know what brings you into the present moment, and figure out what you need. And so I invite people to get creative about trying out different anchors throughout their day, right? So there's the formal sitting meditation practice, but also there's the rest of your life, right? And seeing what helps bring you back to the present when you're lost in thought, when you're lost in a swirl of anxiety, and experiment with that. And my class is on Thursdays, 8:30 Pacific, and it's called Living with Intention. So we really try to hone down what our values are and emphasize that as a focus of practice.
So I guess what I'd like to leave folks with is, as far as anchors go, there's a lot of flexibility there. So there's no right or wrong. There's not one that's better than another. I think I would suggest whatever anchor works for you that you bring into mindfulness practice, whether it's seated meditation or some movement practice like walking meditation or mindful walking, is consistency, a little bit of discipline, but also easefulness. So be kind to yourself, do what you need to do to make the practice accessible to you, and let it be a time to cultivate along with that mindful space, your capacity to be kinder to yourself. And I teach on Thursdays at 12 o'clock Pacific time.
Well, thank you all, Manisha, Desiree, and Herky, for having this conversation and sharing your insights and your wisdom. And thanks to the live students for being here and engaging with us. And thanks to the students that are watching the recording. We're so happy you're all here in one way or another. Before we end this session, I just want to share with everyone that we do have something new at Within that we're trying to get the word out. We started what we're calling Within circles. So they're kind of like a different way to engage with our teachers. This particular circle is called Mindful Living Circle, and it's put on by Devin Pipers. And it's a 12-week circle where with about 6 to 8 other people, so a regular group, you'll meet once a week and really try to bring mindfulness to your daily life. So taking all that stuff that you learn on the cushion with you into your life, and very similarly to what we've talked about here, perhaps through anchors, different anchors, and experimenting with that. But all the while having this group that you regularly meet with to be accountable to, but also to get ideas from and to hear their experiences and to really create that connection with a group to kind of keep you on that path of wanting to bring mindfulness into your day and not just have it on the cushion. And that starts in April. It's Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or Thursdays, April 11th through June 30th. And then we have different times as well that are available. So if you're interested in that, just visit our website. It is available, let's see, under the courses and retreats tab of our website, and it's called Mindful Living Circles. And we're hoping as this circle takes off to offer other circles as well. So there's a lot of different ideas about what we might offer, perhaps around grief, perhaps around forgiveness. I mean, there's so many different opportunities, but we're going to start with these, and we'd love for any of you to join us. And I think maybe everybody could unmute and we might say goodbye all at once, and just thank you all so much for being here. And I'll count to 3.
Thank you.
Okay, bye. 1, 2, 3, bye.
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 Thanks so
Take
much.
care, everyone.